why don't we pivot into our top 5 games of 2024?
Let's do it.
Let's get into it. Let's get into it. So maybe you can just give the rundown of some of your stats. You do a more diligent job than me of logging your plays and stats on Board Game Geeks. So why don't you give us the rough contours of 2024 for you?
Yeah, so I use an app called BG Stats, and it links up to the Board Game Geek website. And then at the end of the year, I guess it's been a trending thing with like Spotify and
Right.
Letterbox is doing it, and BG Stats is doing it, probably a bunch of others.
Sure. Track
But
your hobbies.
basically, at the end of the year, you get this like rap video or rap stats kind of page.
In a nutshell, your year in review. Yeah,
exactly. So in 2024, I played 257 games. So 257 plays of 110 different games.
Sure.
My most played designer was Bruno Cathala.
No surprise
I've
there.
mentioned him on the pod before as being one of my favorite designers. Also because he designs a lot of simple, easy to table games that still scratch the itch for the more serious quote unquote board gamer.
Yeah.
So those types of games are like just perfect for me right now, because those are the kind of games I could play with my 8-year-old Charlie. So my most played games, and a lot of these, in fact, probably more than half of these that I'm just going to rattle off here, are primarily games that I just play with my family. So they're not necessarily my favorite games or the games that I would always choose to put to the table, but they're games that my kids love, my wife loves, and that we can play as a family. So Project L is one that my wife loves and both my kids really like to play. So we get that to the table. Sausage Sizzle is one that was recommended to me by Ryan, Natalie, and Jeff, the Gamecasters. So I picked that one up at Gen Con, and we've been playing it a ton. It's probably my 5-year-old Remy's favorite game.
Cool.
So it's just a little push your luck dice game that is always good for a laugh. Robo Trick has been one of my favorite games.
Yeah, we mentioned that, got a shout out, I think, on a previous episode.
Yeah, a lot of these.
Gen Con.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Gang has been an amazing game that I've been playing a ton.
Yeah, you got me into that one.
Sky Team is one that I've been playing with Charlie.
Great
two-player
game.
Yeah, a ton of fun with that one. That's pretty clever. It's probably one of my favorite roll and writes that I've been playing a lot over the last year. Thunder Road Vendetta is a Kickstarter that just fulfilled not too long ago, and probably Charlie's favorite game if you asked him. It's either that or Raiders of the North Sea. Those are his two go-tos. Bus is a re-release, the 25-year-old board game that was really tough to get, but they finally re-released it in 2024 that I finally picked up and played. We'll talk about that a little bit more later.
Oh, spoiler alert.
And Flip 7 is another push your luck little family weight card game that, again, my whole family likes. And you know what? I've been playing that with it's a great little filler game that I've been playing with my game group as well. And it's one of those games that every time I bring it out, everybody has a blast. So those are my most played games of 2024.
Nice. Now, I don't have the BGG Stats app like you. Maybe that's something I'll look into for 2025. But just as you're rattling off your list, definitely The Gang is one recently that I've been getting to the table quite a bit with my family and friends. That's been a hit. My son and I had a good run through Sky Team. We just went through all the levels there over the summer. That was a good go to camp rainy day, just sit down and have at it. So that one got to the table plenty for us as well. The Azul games always seem to hit the table often. They're classics. Some people they're hit and miss, but that's one that my wife loves, and so we'll get those to the table pretty frequently. We did again in 2024. Online, I log a lot of plays on Board Game Arena. So my favorite roll and write game is Railroad Inc. I play that a ton online. It's a good little, just 10, 15 minutes, brain fart before bed. So I got a lot of plays online with that and a couple other ones. But yeah, didn't play nearly as many games as you in 2024, but discovered some gems. And I know our top 5 list, we'll get into some honorable mentions first, but these are our top 5 new to us games. So they may be new in 2024. They may not. Most of mine are in 2024. I think all of them are 2024, the ones I picked. Maybe one was 2023. But why don't we start with some honorable mentions that didn't quite make the cut? You wanna lead off on those honorable mentions, Matt?
Yeah, sure. So Dune War for Arrakis is kind of a huge, it's a CMON game.
Yeah.
It's a big 2-player war game. with minis and a huge map. And uh, I mentioned this one, maybe earlier in the year, but um, it may end up replacing Star Wars Rebellion. Not fully, like StarArs Rebellion is an all-time favorite game of mine.
Sure, it's similar.
But like it's just so hard to get to the table, and when you don't play that game very often, there's enough rule nuances and little things to look up that you spend half the time in the rule book.
Yeah,
It's a game where if you're somebody that has a lot more time on their hands and can get it to the table once every couple of months, maybe it's something that makes more sense. But Dune War for Arrakis is a similar game in that it's a huge, epic, sprawling 2-player war game. Where one player plays the big opposing, or I guess the big force with lots of resources, and the other player plays the scrappy little rebellion just trying to sneak by and achieve some goals. So it has a lot of similarities in that way. But the rules overhead is a lot simpler, a lot
more
easier
streamlined
to
setup,
and for sure.
That's good.
And it's a lot shorter. Typically, like if both players have played at least once, you're probably looking at about 2 hours. Whereas like
3 to 4 for Star Wars Rebellion.
Often. Even if you're experienced, you're probably looking at
it's a full day.
Yeah. So
and May 4th only comes once a year, so I just pull it out for May 4th. Usually, my son and I will pull it out. But yeah, I agree. Like, I got to look at the rule book, and it gets a little finicky. How do we do that again? How do we resolve the conflict again?
Maybe when my kids are a little bit older and I have the opportunity to get Star Wars Rebellion to the table more often and can just kind of hold those rules and those nuances in my brain rather than having to look up so many things, and I have more time on my hands for those 4 or 5 hour games. Because I absolutely love Star Wars Rebellion, but for now, like Dune, I'm so used to saying Dune Imperium. Dune War for Arrakis might kind of slide into that slot.
That makes sense for the reasons you mentioned. No, that's good. It's good. Any other honorable mentions you want to show?
A bunch. Reef Project is one I picked up at Gen Con. Really great kind of Euro game with some area majority stuff going on. It feels a lot like a roll and write. So if you want like something that feels combo-y and kind of feels like the way that you get roll and writes and combo things off in roll and writes, but in a bigger package. Reef Project's a really, really great one, also released in 2024. Far Away, I've talked about on the pod before. A great little card game that you play kind of backwards. So you draft a card, you put it on your table, and then there's 8 rounds. And then, I won't go too much into detail, but every round you put a new card down. And then at the end of the game, you flip all those cards face down. And then you flip over the last card. You reveal the last card that you played and score it. And then you reveal the next one and score it. And all these cards are codependent and say like score X amount of points for every red card, for every night card, for every this card or that card. So you really have to plan ahead and rewire your brain in the way that you score these typical kind of tableau building combo, card games. It's a really, really interesting one that if I played more, it might have made my top 5. But I played it a handful of times. I had a lot of fun with it.
Nice.
What else do we have here? Arcs is a game that probably, if I had the time to get it to the table a little bit more often, probably would have made this one just missed.
Yeah, I've been seeing that on other top 10 lists.
Really, really cool. And I did a first impressions video. If you want to check out our YouTube channel, I did a first impressions video on Arcs. It's a really great game. I'm sure, long term it's going to end up as being one of my favorites. I absolutely loved my 2 plays of it, but I need to get it to the table a little bit more before I, really give it its. I haven't even, put a rating on BGG because I really want to digest a game and understand it fully before I give it a star rating. And then finally, my last honorable mention is Rebel Princess, another game released in 2024. A great trick-taking game where there's a specific suit you're trying to avoid winning. And every round there's new rules. So you flip over a rule for that round that says, oh, this round, this type of card scores this way, or also try to avoid this kind of card, or play this way instead of that way. So every round you're trying to figure out how to play out your hand. It just adds a couple of extra layers on the trick taking thing that that really makes it interesting. And I've played that one 4 or 5 times now, and it's really great. Highly recommend checking out Rebel Princess. So those are my honorable mentions for 2024.
Well, I agree because Rebel Princess is on my honorable mentions list. Just picked that up recently because of you. Played a couple rounds of it. Really enjoyed it. Again, I got to play it a little more. It might go up in my list or my rating, but I love a good trick taking game, and that's one of the better ones I played recently. So I wanted to shout that out. I wasn't sure if it would be on your list or not. Again, I don't need to go deep into the next one because we did a whole episode devoted to it. But Wonderland's War is one that first play I was a little left a bad taste in my mouth. We played it again, but it's been sitting with me. I'm looking forward to getting that back to the table again.
Cool.
Just love the table presence of that game, and the player interaction is pretty neat in that one. I love a good area control game, so that's on my honorable mentions. And then an old party game that just was a blind spot for years, but I kept hearing this is one of the best party games. I was looking at my shelf. It was kind of devoid of some good party games. And as recently as yesterday, we had some friends over watching NFL football, and the guys were downstairs, and the kids and moms were upstairs, and just hooting and hollering and laughing, having a great time playing this game. And I went up to check on them, and the friend of my son's, who's just 13 years old, he said, when you go back downstairs, tell my mom this game's awesome. We want to buy it. It's called Wavelength. Just a pretty simple 2-team party game. And so I wanted to shout that one out as well. I'm sure many people are already familiar with it. But yeah, those are 3 diverse, different games that I wanted to shout out for my honorable mentions.
Very cool.
All right,
should we get into it?
Here we go. Number 5. What do you got? Number 5, Matt?
So my number 5 is Lord of the Rings Duel.
I figured this would go up.
So it's the Seven Wonders Duel kind of rebrand, reskin into Lord of the Rings theme. Yes, they rethemed it, but they also changed a handful of the rules, streamlined some of the stuff that was that some of the minor issues with Seven Wonders Duel, because as I said before, it was already one of my favorite games, and for sure one of my favorite 2-player games. But as a big fan of the Lord of the Rings movies, this was an easy one to pick up and
theme matters,
try.
right?
And for sure, and they did a really good job with the theme. It still feels a little bit abstracted, but there's definitely some moments and some situations where you're moving the ring towards Mount Doom, and that feels very thematic. And then the Nazgul is chasing you down that same track. There's a little bit of there's an actual area control map element that's been introduced instead of just the push and pull kind of tug of war that happens in Seven Wonders Duel. Cool. So definitely just adds a little bit of theme, and I think cleans up a little bit of the mechanics. And so that's my number 5 for 2024.
Interesting. This will be an interesting sort of dovetail to my number 5, because my number 5 is a bit of a reskin of a very popular game from a few years ago. My number 5 is a game called Wormspan. Have you played Wormspan as of yet?
I have not played Wormspan. I played Wingspan 2-3 times. Okay. Yeah.
So Wingspan I like. I don't necessarily love it. I love the aesthetics. I love the theme. It's a game I own. I don't get to the table, but they rethemed the game. And it's not just like the one you just mentioned at your number 5, it's not just a copycat version of Wingspan with dragons. I should say Worm is not spelled W-O-R-M, it's W-Y-R-M. So Wormspan, meaning dragons, hatchlings. So I think it's an upgrade from Wingspan personally. I think there's a little more to the game. The base mechanics are the same. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Wingspan, but you've got limited options. You can do basically 4 options on your turn. You've got these dragon cards in hand, but you've also got these excavation tiles in hand, and you need to excavate caves before you can build further into your cave. And there's basically 3 levels of caves that you're building to. So on your turn, you're either playing a dragon in a cave that's already excavated, or you're playing an excavation tile to be able to dig further into your cave. Because the further you dig into your cave, when you play a dragon or you go to that cave, you get more benefits, more rewards, more resources in hand, and you can create some different interesting combos, much like Wingspan. But I think these are much more fun and fascinating. You've got these little hatchling dragons as well that have unique abilities. So you're trying to keep an eye on what everybody else is doing. Like Wingspan, at the end of each round, you've got bonuses that you're all competing for. So there is some good player interaction there. I think a little more player interaction in this one than in Wingspan as well.
I was going to ask that,
Yeah, which definitely bumps it up if I'm comparing the two. don't get me wrong, I'll play Wingspan what's on the table, but if I had to choose between one or the other, Wormspan will be my new go-to in the Span universe. And as of this recording, it was just announced that the Span universe is expanding further. Expanding. We got Finspan on the horizon in 2025, which I'm like, how many more Span games do we need? But hey, I'm a Stonemaier guy, so I will ride with Stonemaier. So I'll probably end up biting the bullet and fishing for this one, no pun intended, when it comes out in 2025. So that's
a couple of dads doing
So that's Wormspan. That's my number 5. And check it out if you like Wingspan.
And that was a 2024 release.
It was a 2024 release. So look at me.
My number 4 is not a 2024 release, but it's new to me. Okay. Most of my games are 2024. I think all but 2. And then I think...
Come on, El Grande. Come on, El Grande.
I've not played El Grande yet. But I hear it's a great party game.
It's a party, all right.
So my number 4, as I said, is not a 2024 game. It was released in 2020, but it's new to me in 2024. And I think all but 2 of my top 5 are 2024. And then all of my honorable mentions were 2024. Right. So mostly 2024 for those complaining. Robo Trick is my number 4. So Robo Trick is a game that was introduced to me and I purchased at Nerdfest.
Didn't you mention that in your honorable mentions? You mentioned that in your most played. That was one of your most played. Right, gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm like, we've heard that already today.
And this is one I don't play with the family at all. So this is a legit game that I love getting to the table and have fun. And anytime I'm in a 3-player group, like there's a little thing in the back of my head going, Robo Trick, you got to play Robo Trick.
So when family gets in the way of good games.
Robo Trick is specifically and only a 3-player game. So it's one of my absolute favorite trick-taking games. Nikosu Dice is probably my favorite. And Rebel Princess is kind of making a bid for, in that conversation as well. But as it stands right now, also Cat in the Box, one of my favorite trick takers. A really interesting one there. But I love trick-taking games. Major renaissance in the trick-taking game world in the last 3-4 years. And I'm on board. I'm loving it. And so Robo Trick is a game where it's 3 players, but it's actually 4 players because there is an AI. And basically the AI is just a card that you'll take out of a stack of about a dozen. And then every round, the robot will act a little bit differently. So it'll say, like, if it's leading, it'll play this kind of card. And if it's following, it'll play this kind of card. And if it can't follow, it'll play this kind of card. Right. And all you're trying to do is either win or specifically not win cards off of the robot. If you win high cards off the robot, you get those points. If you lose to the robot, you get your card back as negative points. So it's a game that really is tough, and it's a fun game. It's really sometimes difficult to like play your hand out just so to try to get those points. But it's also hilarious because there's plenty of games where everybody ends up in negative points,
right?
Because the robot just wins all the tricks, and you have to try to just set yourself up to be the person who has the least negative points.
Sure, cut your losses.
I've definitely won that game with negative points.
Wow.
So it can be funny and hilarious in that way too. My good friend Dan calls it That Stupid Game. Can we play That Stupid Game? Because every time he's like, "Oh, this game is so stupid," and he keeps losing or like getting negative points. Like, I think he really likes it, but he calls it That Stupid Game because half the time you're just angry at what's happening. So it's a good one, and it's a blast for sure.
Cool. I'm looking forward to.
You haven't played
it. I haven't played it yet. So
we got to try to do that for sure.
Get up to the table. Someone else who loves trick-taking games. So nice. My number 4 has already been mentioned today. It's not a trick-taking game per se. It's a co-op game. And Matt, like you and I could have designed this game. I'm kicking myself for not having this idea. It's The Gang.
Oh yeah,
it's The Gang. I'm a lifelong fan of poker.
So simple.
It's so simple, but so much fun and so elegant. All right, and much has been said on this podcast and all over the place about this game. It's another 2024 release. Literally, you get this to the table in 20 minutes or less. 3 to 6 players, cooperative Texas Hold'em poker. That's it. But there's no talking, right? You get your you get your pocket cards. And then we were playing yesterday. I mentioned we were playing some party games yesterday. We played 6-player.
Oh man.
Six, no, it was five. They played 5-player and they
Okay.
won. Came right down to the last round. They won. We've never won 6-player yet. But the more players you have, the more difficult it is, because the idea is you're trying to get your hands in order without verbally talking to each other. You've got chips for 4 rounds of chips where you're trying to guess with non-verbal cues and grabbing chips from each other, who has the best hand, who has the worst hand, and then the big reveal at the end. And the goal is you're trying to unlock 3 vaults before you trip 3 alarms. And every time you trip an alarm, you get an accomplice to help you out, which I love. This is a part of the game I think is very cool.
Yes, those
It
cards
really
are
makes
cool.
it tight. When you miss, you get a bump up that gives you a little more of a boost for the next round. But when you unlock a vault, yeah, we're excited. And the bad news is, oh no, now we got like security cameras, a retina scan to deal with, and it makes it a little more difficult. So more often than not, at least in a 4 or 5-player game, I find it goes right down close. It gets really tight at the end. 3 players, really simple usually. So yeah, it's just simple. If you know how to play Texas Hold'em poker, even if you don't and you want to learn, this is a good way to learn how to play poker. Get around the table together, and we love it because at the end of one game or one round, okay, we lost that round. Okay, we can talk now. Let's look back. Oh yeah, you went from the 4 to the 1, so you must have hit this pair here. And we talked about where we went wrong.
I feel like it's
we'll
a
do
game
next time.
that you discuss more than you play when you play.
Yeah,
and it's just part of the fun.
Yeah, so in between rounds, you kind of, okay, we did it great, awesome, let's keep it up. Good job with this. Okay, next round we got to do the same. Or next round we got to rethink this next round and make sure we watch this. So, yeah, it's so simple, so elegant. 20 minutes, not a weighty, heavy game, but it's probably one that will get to the table regularly, not only with family, but with friends and gaming groups as well. So that's the gang, my number 4.
Very cool. It's my number 3. So
okay,
easy,
there it is.
Easy to continue that conversation. I don't have a whole lot more to add. I'll just say that probably my favorite moments of that game. And again, like there's no, once the cards are on the table and you're playing, you're not allowed to really discuss anything about your hands.
Right.
And everybody just reaches for the chip that's either a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or 6, depending on the player count. So a lot of times somebody will just reach for that one, and then like somebody from across the table. And the rules say you're not allowed to give a person a chip. Right. All you do is you just reach for the chip, regardless of where it may be. Reach for the chip that you believe should be yours. So it's just those moments that are so funny where I grab the number 1 chip, and then the person across from me goes, no. I'm grabbing the number 1 chip. And you're like, no. So you're just kind of like fighting over it.
Yeah, with us it becomes how demonstrably we grab the chip. Like my son will just bang, he'll slam his finger on the table and rip it. I'm like, okay, he had top pair, that's obvious, or he's got pocket aces, right? Or you'll kind of like slowly go for like, does anybody else want it before me? Yeah. So the nonverbal cues are important, right? They kind of give some tells without opening your mouth. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Fantastic
it's always a fun story. Yeah,
and it was one of my most played games of 2024 as well.
Yeah, I've only had it for like a month, and it's gotten to the table a lot, so that's a good sign. Awesome.
Cool. Your number 3.
My number 3 is one I mentioned on a previous podcast, and look at me go, 3 in a row from 2024. My number 3 is a game called Harmonies. I'm looking on BGG here. This is the number 3 abstract game already.
No
on
way.
BGG. All time. And it's the number 17 family game. And it's just outside the top 100.
Holy!
And this is a 2024 game, so it's not just me. Yeah, it's doing well. This is
I own this game as well. Okay,
this
just missed my honorable mention.
This is a light medium strategy. It's got an 8 on BGG, 1 to 4 players, 30 to 45 minutes. Weight is 2 out of 5. But for a 2 out of 5 game, there's enough going on here. It's in that sort of Azul type game, Azul, Cascadia. You mentioned Reef Project. There's another game called Reef that came out years previously. I don't know if you ever played Reef, but
I think so.
Which is cool. I love this. So you're building, basically you're building a nature environment on your personal player board. And much like Azul, if you're familiar with Azul, you're grabbing from a series of options, kind of like a rondelle. You've got on your turn, you're grabbing 3 different colored discs, and you have to place those strategically on your player board because you've got a number of cards with patterns, and you need to satisfy those patterns to score points, to score rewards. So you're building mountains, you're building trees, you're building desert area and water area, and based on what those patterns look like on your player board, you're trying to squeeze out and maximize as many points as possible. Now you get point values in 2 ways in this game. Every continuous chain of water is worth points, and I think every clump of 2 or more deserts is worth points, and and depending on how tall your trees are, they're worth generic amount of points. So you get generic values that's shared amongst all players.
But there's a 3D element, right?
And you're building up,
well,
which I love. Yeah, much like that game Reef, you got a 3D element, which really adds to it. So that you can, and the mountains have to be touching or they're worth no points. But then you've got these cards that are unique to you that score points if you build them in certain number of times. And so there's a level 1 on the card, level 2, level 3, sometimes 4 or 5 times. If you can repeatedly make the same pattern, you're adding to your base point value. So, and you're trying to do it all, and you're keeping an eye on the other person's player board, other people's player board, because when there's only 2 vacant spots left on someone's player board, that triggers the end of the game. And so you want to try and squeeze out one more turn before someone triggers the game end. So it's not a long game, but there's enough thinking that I love it. It really hits that light, medium, sweet spot that I love. It's abstract, but it's still pretty thematic. It's easy to teach. It's easy to learn. I play this with my kids. I play this with my gaming group. I have not introduced this to anyone who hasn't enjoyed this game. And so it's my number 3. And apparently I'm in good company because this has been a hot one from 2024. It's Harmonies.
Very cool. Yeah, I own this one. I haven't played it enough. I need to get it to the table a little bit more. I loved I want to say 2 or 3 plays of it. Mm-hmm. If I played it more, probably would have ended up being in my honorable mentions, maybe even my top 5. But yeah, need to get it to the table a little bit more. Yeah, so my number 2, is that where we're at? Yeah, my number 2. Mentioned it a little bit earlier, but this is an old game. This is originally released, I believe, in 1999.
I knew this would be, I didn't know if this would be 2 or 1.
It's a 25-year-old game, making it on my best of 2024 list. Because it's new to me, but also it was re-released in 2024, and that's Bus.
I haven't had a chance to play this with you, and I'm itching to. So
dude,
you got to get this to the table in 2025. Yeah.
So Bus is confirmed, released in 1999, and designed by Joran Duman and I don't know if it's Joris or Joris Weirsinga. Sorry if I butchered that. But Bus is kind of a route building game. It's for a game that is so simple and so easy to play. It's a little bit tricky to explain. I also did a first impressions video of this with a little bit more explanation of how it plays. So definitely go check out our YouTube channel. But yeah, there's route building, and there's just a whole bunch of routes, and you're putting little like long, sort of like Catan roads, but they represent your route, and you're putting these on the table on kind of like set up routes that you're trying to connect. And then every intersection on the board also has space for a building, and there's either home, work, or the pub. I mean, really, the only 3 places that matter. Homework and pub. And so every round, the game is going to tell you, okay, you're now trying to get people to the pub. And then the action selection is really neat. So if you picture from top to bottom, there's a whole bunch of what look like worker placement locations. And you have these little action cylinders. And the one thing that I find really interesting about the game, they're finite. So you only get 20 of them. So you get 20 actions in this game. You want to use them in the first 4 or 5 rounds, you may. You're probably not going to accomplish very much, but you can. And I actually played this 2 nights ago with a few friends. And one of my friends was kind of being very, very conservative with their cylinders. And I went off to a huge lead. I think I had 8 or 9 points. And they were at like 1 and 2 points. My 2 opponents, the 2 people that I played with, and they were being a lot more conservative with their cylinders, and in that very last round, because he had way more actions, he came right back up. I still ended up winning by I think 2 points, but it ended up being a lot tighter, and I was sweating. And it just so happened that they were in a position, that my 2 opponents, where if there's only one person with cylinders left at the end of a round, the game ends. And they each had a couple of cylinders left, and I had none left. So they were discussing amongst each other whether or not they'd want to play another round or would need to. And then I guess my buddy mathed out that he thought he could catch me and just ended up missing. But it's one of these games. I mean, I won't talk too much more about it. It's fantastic. It's one of these games that you can learn in 5 minutes, and you still have no idea how to play until you've played at least,
Yeah.
a full game.
Well, maybe one thing I'd love to consider adding to the podcast, I'm just brainstorming on air here, but maybe we could do the odd playthrough video.
Yeah,
And maybe we could set up a playthrough, and maybe this would be a good one.
Bus would be a great one to do.
Yeah.
The rules are simple enough that I could teach it in 5 or so minutes, 5 or 10 minutes. But again, like I could teach you all the rules, but you won't even get the nuances of the game until like halfway through your first game.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get anywhere near being good at the game or even proficient at the game until you've played 2 or 3 times.
Well, and that's typically a sign of a good game. You don't want to master it on first play, right? There's some nuance there. Yeah, no, that's good. Well, these designers, they did a game that's even more popular than this one. It's a little more beastly than this one. I think they did Food Chain Magnate.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Which is a beast, same publisher. Yeah. So it's nice to see this one re-implemented, and this is the year I get it on the table with you. So plus,
it's not
what, 3 to 5 players, eh? Yeah,
3 to 5. Yeah. And plays great at 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
My very first game was 5.
A little too much.
Maybe it's probably fine with 4 or 5 good experienced players. But I definitely would not recommend that as your first time.
Well, it's like you playing 7-player Scythe for your first Scythe game. Like,
that was rough for sure. But just the nature of this game being like having no idea how to play well. We had 5 people having no idea how to play well.
Right.
The first time.
Yeah.
And it was messy. Yeah. But an incredible game. And it probably sits. I haven't really thought about it, but I would wager that if I went and looked at my favorite games of all time, it would probably slot into the top 10.
Okay. Wow, that's high praise given the amount that you've played this year.
Yeah.
My number 2 is the only game on my list that is technically not a 2024 release. It's a late 2023 release, but I got it to the table this past year. And I also have to confess that my top 2, I haven't had a lot of plays in these, but they just hit me so hard. The few plays I did play that I couldn't resist putting in my top 2 slots. I won't say they're in top 10 all time territory as of yet. They may get there with more plays. I think I mentioned this one briefly in one of our previous episodes. It's called World Wonders. World Wonders.
You have, yeah.
Yeah, this one hit a lot of sweet spots for me. Yeah, it's in that, top 500 on BGG, top 100 family games. A little weightier than some of the other games I mentioned, but not beastly by any stretch. Came out in 2023. It was designed by Zay Mendez, a polyomino tile laying game with some amazing bits and pieces. Good value for what you get out of the box in this game. I was pleasantly surprised the first time I opened this box and I saw all these literally wonders of the world, almost like the 7 Wonders style, but you got these cool little minis. Everybody has their own little player board in which you're purchasing one of 5 different colors of buildings, and you're placing them on your player board, but you have to place a road first, and they're all connected to roads, and basically it's kind of a shared auction. Everybody on each round has 7 coins to spend, and one of the cool mechanics of this game is you can buy roads, you can buy towers, you can buy buildings, or you can buy these big awesome monuments that look great on your map. And you can buy a monument. There's 3 of them up for grabs at any time, but whenever you buy a monument, you're spending all remaining coins you have. They don't have a set cost. So you're looking around the table and you're like, and there's prerequisites. You're like, I can satisfy the prerequisite for this monument. It would slot in nice on my board, but Matt can also do so. Do I want to spend all 7 of my coins to buy it now? Or do I want to squeeze a couple extra purchases out and then maybe spend 1 or 2? But if I wait, he's going to grab it before me. So there's that interesting decision making in this game, which I found so fascinating. It's not set prices on these. Now there's set costs for the buildings. The bigger the building, the more space it takes up on your board, scores more points potentially.
Yeah, it's like an opportunity cost.
Yeah. And then do I want to put more roads because I can only build off roads, and buildings of like color can touch each other on your board. The monuments have to fit in certain spots. So it's kind of that Tetris style or pile of cat style where you're laying them. But I find the theme just drips off this game. It's really neat. The end game scoring is interesting too, because on the buildings that you place on your board, you're going to have one of three symbols. And like other games, you're going to move those up a scoring track, but you're only going to score whichever one of those is the lowest value you achieve throughout the game. So you got to keep pushing all three of those different colors up throughout the game. You can't just push one at the expense of others. You're going to have a low score. So you're just this push and pull mechanism. There's this when to pull the trigger and spend my money to buy the big monuments. You want to cover as much as your board as possible, because every sort of natural resource that's touching one of your buildings scores additional points. So this game just sings for me. The few times I've got it to the table, I've played it with some of our mutual friends, Roger and Nat and some others, and they love it as well. It has great table presence. It's 50 to 70 minutes, so it's not that long of a game, but it's enough to kind of scratch that itch to that sort of medium weight game. It's called World Wonders. If you like a resource management game, there's some polyomino placement on the board. If you like a good abstract sort of puzzly game, I think this one might hit your sweet spot as well as it did for me.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a really interesting player interaction kind of situation with this game where and I mean, when I say player interaction, a lot of immediately, so many people think, oh, I like games where I just kind of mess with you. Not at all. For me, my quote unquote player interaction kind of thing that I'm looking for is I just really want to care what other people are doing on their turns.
Yeah.
I really want to care and look and see what they're up to, because it may or may it likely will affect me. And it sounds like, based on the bidding mechanism and the like going for things at specific times, you're going to have those moments where you're like, he can go after this one too. Oh, is this the right time? And if you don't pay attention to that stuff and you're just looking at your own thing, you're probably going to suffer.
Yeah, so you got to keep your head up, but it's not too much like heavy take that. I don't like a game that's too harsh.
Fair,
so it threads that needle nicely where I can't just have my head down and do my own thing. I got to see what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
Maybe deter them and get it before somebody else does.
Mm-hmm.
But if you miss something, there's usually something you can pivot to right away. It's not going to crush your whole game if you miss getting a monument you need. So
right.
I love Board Game Geek because I can see games that have been nominated. So this was nominated for the 2023 Golden Geek Medium Game of the Year. And I usually look at that one. I'm a medium guy. As I get older, I don't want 4 or 5. I don't have time for 4 or 5 hour game experience. Maybe a couple times a year I do, but nor do I want something that's just 10 minutes in and out. Like, this is that good sort of 45 minutes to an hour experience. You can play it once. You can even play it twice in the night and enjoy it. So yeah. World Wonders. It's my number 2.
My number 1.
Okay, let me guess. I figured it would. Can I guess?
Yeah, I don't think you'll get it, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, there were 2 that I considered for your number 1. One was Bus. The other one I haven't played, but you've talked about it a few times. Federation?
It is Federation. Yeah, well done.
Yeah, I know you've talked about it a few times. So
Federation is not a 2024 release, but it was new to me in 2024. And
it's not that old. What year did it come out?
It came out in 2022.
I mean, it's also right above your head in the studio here.
Yeah.
So I keep looking over like,
It was kickstarted in 2020, or I guess probably fulfilled in 2022.
Okay.
And then I don't think it was super widely available until 2023.
Sure. So it's
and
still
I didn't
last
get
year,
it
right?
until like
so it's new
early
enough.
2024.
New enough. It's new to a lot of others, I'm sure too.
And I've played this 5-6 times this year, and it is a fairly heavy, fairly long game. This is one of my. I mean, if Bus is in my top 10 and I'm ranking this in the same kind of ballpark, this is probably in my top 10 as well. So it's a 7.9 on BGG.
Solid.
The weight is 3.73, so fairly heavy. I will say I don't think it's because
so it's the heaviest game on both of our top 5s. I think
I would say probably yeah for sure. With the complexity rating or the weight rating on BGG is fairly subjective, and for a lot of people, the length of the game plays a huge factor. Sure. So even if a game is not super complex, if it's a 2-3 hour game, immediately it gets a couple points added. So I think that the game, in terms of the rules, is probably not a 3.73, but the decision making and the length of the game probably brings it up into that zone.
Okay.
So I guess I'm saying that for the reason I'm saying that is, don't be afraid of this game.
Sure.
If you play medium weight games, you'll be able to play this game.
This is not a Lacerda game.
No, this is not a Lacerda game. The decision making and everything you have to consider when you make a decision, I will say AP, analysis paralysis, is potentially a concern with this game. If you have somebody in your group that's really prone to it and has a really hard time with it, But otherwise, this game is fantastic, and I highly recommend it.
Confession, sometimes that's me.
You know what? I get there sometimes
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
I definitely get there sometimes too. But yeah, so Federation is a like a sci-fi space Senate themed game. So if you picture the Senate in Star Wars, where there's this huge room, and in fact, the cover of this game kind of takes some inspiration from that 100%, because all these different alien species are floating on these like pods where they're going to be voting and discussing things, and so it very much is that kind of that theme. But basically, there's a grid of worker placement locations. So this is a worker placement game. You have 4 quote unquote workers that are actually poker chips that are 2-sided, and each side of the poker chip will do something a little bit different when you play it.
Okay.
So when you play your worker, you can choose which side of your worker you want to play.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that'll have a different effect on what you're doing. Not only that, there's this grid. And the grid, I'm going to try to bring up a picture of it so that I can explain it a little bit better here. But this grid has, it is 6 by 3. So there's 18 spaces that you can put your worker. And all of these spaces do different things. And around this grid of worker placement locations, there are tracks. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different tracks on the board. And on these worker placement locations, they will let you go up these tracks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these tracks do different things. And at the end of the game, the people that are highest on these tracks will get points, and that kind of thing as well. But the crux of this game and what makes it so fun and interesting to me is that these 18 worker placement locations on this grid have so many considerations when you're placing your worker there. So first of all, these 18 spaces are split into the left side and the right side, 9 and 9. So if you're placing your workers on the left side, you're basically voting for something to happen that is associated with that left side.
Yep.
If you're putting on the right side, you're voting for something to happen that's associated with the right side. And at the end of the round, you're going to add up everybody's workers, and whichever has the most, the thing will happen on that side. I'm not going into too many details about what those things are, but you're basically voting for which side is going to win.
Yeah.
Not only that, each column, you're voting for a major project that you're trying to get funded by the end of the game. So every time you place a worker in a column, you may be trying to get that major project to win at the end of the game. Not win, but achieve that major project. And then there's the rows. So every row has an end of the round scoring, where if you have the majority workers on each row, you'll get points. So you're concerned about the sides, you're concerned about the columns, you're concerned about the rows, and you're concerned about which side of your worker you're going to place. So that's what I mean by analysis paralysis. But it is so rewarding, and every time you play a worker, it feels so satisfying, and every action feels so important to your end game and what you're trying to achieve. And not only are you doing that, you're going up these tracks, which is super satisfying. You're gathering resources, you're purchasing cards, you're purchasing tiles, and doing all kinds of things. And I'm a huge, huge fan of this game. And we need to get it to the table this year, because
absolutely,
I think you'd really dig this one as well.
Yeah. No, it looks like it's got great table presence.
Dual layered player boards. Yeah. Beautiful art, beautiful table presence, very vibrant and colorful, chunky poker chips, like heavy poker chips.
Good year for poker chip games, eh?
Yeah. So yeah, it's very satisfying. The production is A1, and highly recommend Federation as my number 1 game of 2024.
Fantastic! I can't wait to play it. Looks good. I've already mentioned it before. Boss and Federation will be on the table frequently this year.
Let's do it.
Okay, my number 1, and I'm breaking all my rules here because I haven't played this one as much as the others I've mentioned. And normally I would not put this number 1 if I haven't played at least like 10 plus times. Time didn't permit. But theme matters to me. My favorite game of all time is what, Matt? I think you know this. My favorite game is Viticulture.
Right. Yes, right. I did. Yeah.
So I love wine, theme games. And what goes with wine?
Cheese.
My number one is a game called Fromage.
No way.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
I've heard a ton about this
theme game that I just stumbled upon recently, both on the table and online. You're a cheese maker in this game when you're competing to run the most prosperous creamery in France. And I love a good worker placement game. This, like Federation, has a beautiful table presence. Everyone has their own sort of player mat where you're collecting livestock, you're building buildings, you're collecting fruit to turn into jam that goes well with cheese. But in the middle of the table, you've got this big, round, four-sided sort of basically cheese block. And it's cut into 4 slices. And basically on your turn, you can play one of your 3 workers on whatever quarter of that board is facing you. So you've got 3 workers in this game. You can make hard cheese, you can make soft cheese, or you can make blue cheese. And so you've got a yellow worker for the hard cheese, a white worker for the soft cheese, and a blue worker for the blue cheese. And you can play that worker in one of different spots. You can either play it up near the center of this circular board, collecting resources. There's a 1, a 2, and a 3 spot on each of the 4 quadrants, and that will go towards collecting resources, livestock, building materials, fruit for jam. So if you play that on the 1, the 2, or the 3, you get more resources the higher number you play it on. But each, depending on where you place it in the 1, 2, or 3, it's facing in a different direction. Sort of that quarter cheese either facing to the right, it's facing across, or it's facing to the left. The number 1 is always facing to the right. The number 2 is facing directly across. Number 3 is facing to the left, because after everybody, and this is simultaneous action, which is beautiful. It's like Zolkin. You ever played Zolkin?
I've not.
Okay, similar idea there. So everybody's going to play simultaneously, and then the board is going to rotate 90 degrees. And any worker played on the number 1, you're going to get that back on your next turn. So you're going to get a lower reward, but you're going to get that worker back more quickly during the course of the game. If you play number 2, you got to wait 2 turns to get that one back. If you play number 3, it's facing the left. You're not going to get that back until those are facing you, depending on the orientation of the board.
I don't think you mentioned yet, but the board will rotate, right?
Yeah. So say after everybody takes their simultaneous action, the board rotates, and then you resolve anything that's now facing you from previous turns. You retrieve those workers. But the faster you retrieve them, that's great, but you're getting less resources. So it's this push and pull of, I really want 3 livestock. But if I play my worker there, I'm not getting him back for 3 turns. Is that too big of a sacrifice?
You get the reward right away, though?
Yes. Okay. You get the reward right away.
But you're sacrificing
that worker. You only have limited workers to put out there. And that's only on the middle of the board. Down a little further, closer to you, you've got almost like these 4 little mini games, not games per se, but four things that you're working toward throughout the course of the game. And so depending, again, how much you invest in those, you're going to get more points at the end of the game. And that's kind of the area control part of the game. You got these 4 quadrants on the board, and based on where you put your workers throughout the course of the game, you're going to be working towards beating your opponents to getting more points in those areas. You can't do everything in this game. You certainly can. If you try and do everything, you will lose and lose miserably. You got to focus on a few things just to kind of one up your opponents in different aspects of the game. But I love the simultaneous action. I love the fact that the board is rotating. I love the fact that it's heads up. You're keeping an eye on what everybody else is doing, trying to in your head say, okay, I got to beat Matt in this area of the game, or I'm going to lose. There's no way I can beat him in this area of the game, so I'm going to let him have it. But I want these workers for this round. I'm okay leaving this worker for 2 or 3 rounds. This game is just a cool design. I love the thought that's put into this. I love the player interaction. I love the theme. Everything about this game hit me hard on first play. I played it a few times, and I'll definitely be getting it to the table more frequently in 2025. So I'm sure you're going to see this on a lot of top 10 lists. I don't know if you've heard a lot about it. Yeah.
Every podcast I listen to and every YouTube channel has reviewed this.
Okay, all right.
So it sounds really neat.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit like, how long does it play?
Not long at all. Again, analysis paralysis could be a potential issue in this one too. Right. But because it's simultaneous action, that speeds up the game in theory. It's not like I take my turn and you take your turn. No, we all take a turn, rotate the board. We all take a turn, rotate the board. So I think that speeds it up. It says the gameplay. I'm just going to check it out on BGG here. It says 30 to 45 minutes.
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking closer to an hour though. The weight is 2.5, so it's right in that medium sweet spot of like 1 to 4 players. 4 is best because you got
Right.
one person for each of those quadrants. There is a solo version.
Because from what I understand, the player interaction is not super high on this one.
Not super high,
more
but
or less
yeah, it's
doing
not
your own thing.
You
which is totally fine with me.
Yeah.
I prefer games with lots of player interaction, but it's like there's a ratio. It's like a player interaction to maybe we'll like make a new term here, the pit ratio, player interaction to time ratio. I don't mind at all playing a game with 0 player interaction.
At this length.
Don't want to do it for like an hour and a half to 2 hours plus.
No.
If I'm playing for like an hour or less, I'm totally fine with it.
Yeah, there's not as much direct player interaction, but you still have to keep an eye on what everybody else is doing because you're going for those shared goals and shared points that are going to be split amongst players.
So if there's a little bit of competition there for things,
there definitely is. Yeah.
It sounds really interesting, and the theme sounds super fun.
Yeah, I love it. It's just
I
could see a whole night of wine and cheese and viticulture and fromage being in my regular cycle of gameplay experiences.
Yeah, let's maybe play viticulture and fromage back to back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's my number one.
Very cool.
Fromage.
Very cool. So that is our top 5 quote unquote 2024, I guess, new to us games.